Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most important documents shaping our world, they aren't really in the headlines.
Right.
They're kind of these quiet foundational texts that lay out the rules for our towns, our communities.
The real blueprints.
Exactly. And today, we're diving deep into one of those, a Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. We've got excerpts from an adopted UDO right here.
Yep, the real deal.
And our mission is basically to be your guides, unpack this pretty complex blueprint, and pull out the key insights so you can understand how your town actually plans for the future and manages growth. Think of it like the underlying code, maybe the DNA, that decides where houses go, what businesses can open up down the street,
How your neighborhood looks.
even like how big the trees in a parking lot island need to be. It gets that specific.
It definitely does.
Okay, let's unpack this. So fundamentally, what is a UDO? Like in simple terms.
Well, put simply, a UDO is the town's comprehensive rule book for physical development. Before UDOs were really common, towns often had, separate documents.
Right, one for zoning, one for signs.
Exactly. Zoning, subdivision rules, sign rules, landscaping, all split up. A unified development ordinance pulls all of that into one single organized place.
And having it all together really matters, doesn't it? Because these aren't just random rules, they're tied to bigger goals, right?
Absolutely. The document itself, it lays out the core purposes. First, keeping everyone safe, residents, visitors.
Safety first. Makes sense.
Then making sure the town's arranged conveniently so you can get around easily. And uses are located logically next to each other.
So like keeping heavy industry away from schools, that kind of thing.
Precisely that. It's also fundamentally about protecting the natural environment. Green spaces, managing stormwater, water quality,
Right.
and ensuring essential infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, that it's all adequate and functions correctly to handle the development.
And I saw it goes beyond just the practical stuff, too. It mentions like fostering a unique sense of place
And
and the economy.
yes, definitely. It tries to guide development in a way that builds on the town's character, supports a strong, diverse mix of businesses, and makes sure there's adequate, desirable housing for everyone. For you listening, this document directly shapes your quality of life, economic opportunities, environmental health, the very look and feel of your town. It's the main tool for making the community's vision happen.
That makes a lot of sense. So this UDO, it's trying to be the master plan, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? What happens when it bumps up against other laws or things that were already there before it was written? Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does, yeah, because regulations always have to deal with other laws and existing situations. The UDO actually has specific rules for conflicts.
Okay.
So, for example, if a UDO rule conflicts with a state or federal law, well, the state or federal law always wins.
Always. Got it. So it's powerful locally, but not above the state or feds. What about conflicts with other town rules?
Generally, for development matters, this UDO prevails over other town ordinances, unless the UDO itself says otherwise.
Okay.
And, importantly, if you find two different standards within the UDO that seem to apply to the same thing in conflict,
Yeah.
the more restrictive standard is typically the one that applies. It sort of sets a minimum floor, and sometimes you have to meet an even higher bar.
And what about private agreements, like neighborhood covenants? Do those let you ignore the UDO?
No, they
Okay.
don't. The UDO is pretty clear. Private agreements bind the people in that agreement, sure, but they don't override the UDO's requirement.
So you have to follow both. And if the UDO is stricter, you follow the UDO.
Exactly.
Got it. State-fed UDO, other town codes for development, and private deals don't give you a pass. Okay, what about stuff built or approved before this UDO? How does it handle that transition?
That's crucial. It has transitional provisions. For instance, any violations of the old rules, they still count. They can still be enforced under this new UDO.
Okay, no clean slate there.
Right. And it acknowledges existing nonconformities. These are properties, uses, buildings, whatever,
Yeah.
that were legal under the old rules but don't meet the new UDO standards.
Right. Like my garage example, maybe it was built too close under the new rules but was okay before.
Exactly that. That garage is likely a nonconformity. The UDO doesn't usually make you tear it down right away, but it sets rules for how it can continue, or if you can change it. We'll circle back to that.
Okay.
It also spells out how to handle applications that were already in the pipeline, submitted or approved before the UDO took effect. There are rules based on whether the project established vested rights, basically, a legal right to finish under the old rules because you'd already done significant work or gotten key approvals.
I see.
That definition of existing development often comes down to when construction finished or vested rights were locked in relative to the UDO's start date. It's about drawing a clear line in the sand.
Makes sense. You need that clarity.
Now let's talk about the really fundamental way the UDO organizes the town: zoning.
Ah, the zones. Putting different things in different areas.
Precisely. The UDO divides the whole town into different zoning districts. Each one has its own set of rules about what you can build and how you can use the land.
Like residential areas, commercial areas.
Exactly. You might have several residential districts like R1, R2, R4, R6, maybe increasing in density.
Okay.
The R1 district, for instance, might be focused on watershed protection. That often means very low density, maybe no public water or sewer allowed to protect water quality.
Right.
Then you'd have zones for multifamily housing, RMF perhaps.
And places for work and shopping.
Yep. Commercial zones,
Right.
like light industrial, LI. The document might describe LI as suitable for things like assembly, fabrication, distribution,
Okay.
where most work happens indoors, not creating huge impacts on neighbors. Heavy industry, things with big external impacts, would typically be banned there.
I also saw mixed-use districts mentioned, like DTP.
Ah, yes, downtown periphery, DTP. That's a great example. It's a zone designed not just for one thing, but to encourage a lively mix. The goal there is often to transition from, say, lower density areas to higher density, walkable development with shops, homes, maybe offices all mixed together.
That's nice.
And the UDO sets specific rules to make that happen, like minimum and maximum building heights to create a good street wall.
Oh, interesting. Minimum heights, too.
Yeah, sometimes. Maybe requiring buildings to be at least 2 stories tall for non-residential or mixed use to frame the street better, and maybe requiring a certain percentage of open space on the lot.
So the base zoning sets the main category.
Okay.
But then there are also overlay districts. What are those?
Right. Overlays add extra standards on top of the base zoning.
Ah, like another layer of rules.
Exactly.
Right.
If your property is in, say, an R2 residential zone and a flood hazard overlay,
Right.
well, you have to follow the rules for both.
Okay.
Other examples could be a gateway corridor overlay, maybe with special design rules for buildings on main roads entering town, or a local historic overlay with rules to protect historic character.
Got it. So base zone plus maybe an overlay.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what specific types of businesses or buildings are actually allowed in a given zone?
Okay, that's where the principal use table comes in. It's meant to be a quick guide.
Like a big chart.
Yeah, basically. You look up the type of use: grocery store, hotel, microbrewery, even like an animal daycare.
Kennel. Yeah.
Kennel, yeah. You find that use in the list, then look across to the column for your zoning district. The table uses codes.
Okay, what do the codes mean?
P usually means it's permitted by right. So if you meet all the standard requirements, you should get your permit.
Simple enough.
Piece typically means it needs a special use permit. That usually involves a public hearing, extra review against specific criteria. It's a higher hurdle.
Right, more scrutiny.
And then a symbol, like a dot or maybe an N, usually means it's flat out prohibited in that zone.
That table sounds absolutely essential if you want to build or open anything.
Yeah.
But I bet the UDO gets even more specific, right? Like rules just for certain types of uses.
Oh, absolutely. It drills down. There are sections with detailed rules just for specific uses because they have unique impacts or characteristics the town wants to manage.
Like what?
Well, take accessory dwelling units, ADUs, those little backyard cottages or apartments.
Yeah, those are popular now.
Right. So the UDO might limit you to just one per lot, cap their size, maybe say no more than 35% of the main house's size, or set height limits. The goal might be to allow more housing options, but keep them, compatible with the neighborhood.
Makes sense. What about manufactured homes? I know those often get special attention.
Yes, often very detailed standards. The UDO might require a specific type of foundation enclosure, like brick or stone. Specify a minimum roof pitch, maybe 3.12 or something, require eaves. It might even list acceptable siding materials like cedar, stucco, brick, maybe prohibiting vinyl in some areas.
Wow, so really trying to control the look.
Often, yeah, aiming to make them look and perform more like site-built homes, especially in certain neighborhoods.
And even newer ideas like pocket neighborhoods. I saw that mentioned.
Exactly. A pocket neighborhood is a specific residential style, often a small cluster, say 4 to 12 homes, built around a shared common green space.
Okay.
The UDO might have design standards for those, like requiring porches and main windows to face that common space to encourage interaction. It might even exempt them from standard rules, like maybe certain fence rules, because the layout is different.
So the UDO can adapt to different housing styles, but still sets rules.
Right.
What about more commercial or potentially impactful things like cell towers?
Telecommunications towers, yeah. Classic example. Big visual impact, so they get detailed rules.
Oh, that.
The UDO will likely distinguish between major towers, smaller ones maybe under 30 feet, and concealed towers, the ones designed to look like trees or flagpoles or integrated into buildings.
The stealth the towers.
Right. Standards often include height limits, maybe 200 feet max, even for concealed ones, requirements to screen the ground equipment with fences or landscaping. It's an actively encouraging collocation. That means getting multiple phone carriers to put their antennas on the same tower, so you don't need as many towers overall.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about animal daycares,
Yeah.
nightclubs? Those seem like they could cause issues.
Absolutely. Uses with potential neighborhood impacts get specific rules. Animal daycares might have rules about how far outdoor play areas have to be set back from homes, say 100 feet to reduce noise. Maybe require soundproofing if they're in a shared building.
Right.
Nightclubs, definitely. Big setbacks from residential areas, maybe 500 feet minimum, and requirements for sound mitigation plans because of the late hours and noise potential. The UDO uses these rules to address the specific potential nuisances.
And for something really impactful, like heavy manufacturing, I assume the setbacks are even bigger.
Oh, significantly larger. Heavy manufacturing often requires huge setbacks, maybe 1,000 feet or more from homes, and they'll likely need a specific, very dense type of landscape buffer. A Type D buffer, perhaps designed to screen views and absorb noise or potential odors. It really shows the UDO using distance and buffering as tools.
Even things that aren't permanent, like temporary uses.
Yep, even temporary stuff usually needs a permit. Mobile food vendors, food trucks have rules. Where they can park, how many parking spaces they can take up, setbacks from intersections or building entrances,
Right.
portable storage containers, those PODS things you rent, often limits on how long they can stay on your property, maybe 6 months max, and where you can put them. Can't just block the sidewalk. And you can't store hazardous materials in them. Even short-term things need rules so they don't cause problems.
Okay, so that covers what you can do and where. Now, Article 5 seems to get into the nitty-gritty of how things are built on the site itself, the development standards.
Exactly. This is where the UDO shapes the physical form of development, the actual look and function on the ground.
These are the rules dictating everything from where the driveway goes to what the building actually looks like.
Pretty much. It starts with access and circulation. Basic stuff like every developed lot needs safe and adequate access to a public street.
Can't be landlocked.
Right. This section covers driveway standards, width, spacing, location, and crucial safety things like sight distance triangles at corners and driveways.
Sight distance triangles.
Yeah, it's an area that has to be kept clear of obstructions like fences or tall landscaping so drivers pulling out can see oncoming traffic or pedestrians. There's often a specific measurement, like maybe 10 feet back along the driveway and 70 feet along the intersecting street needs to be clear.
Ah, okay. That visibility space.
Exactly. And pedestrian walkways are often required within larger sites, too, connecting buildings to the street or parking areas.
So you can't just dump a building on a lot. It needs to connect safely. What about the design of the buildings?
That's a big part of design standards, especially for commercial, mixed-use, and multifamily buildings. The goal is often to create a certain look and feel, often more pedestrian-friendly.
How do they do that?
They might require building articulation. That means breaking up big, flat walls, using things like varied materials, windows, projections, recesses, making the building more visually interesting.
Okay.
Primary entrances often have to face the street and be clearly marked, maybe with canopies, special lighting, or lots of glass, to feel welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
Site design rules might encourage using buildings to frame courtyards or plazas. And yeah, large, big box retail stores often have their own specific checklist of design features they must include to kind of break down their scale.
It sounds like the UDO is actively trying to prevent those huge blank boxes and make places feel better at street level.
That's often a key goal, especially in certain zones. There are also standards for exterior lighting, really important for preventing light pollution.
Like lights spilling up into the sky or onto neighbors' property.
Exactly. Rules require shielding on fixtures, so light goes down onto the site where it's needed, not sideways into bedroom windows or up into the night sky.
Right.
Even existing lights that don't meet the new rules often have regulations. You might be able to keep them, but if you replace them or significantly change them, you usually have to bring them into compliance.
Even fences and walls get specific rules.
Oh, yes. The UDO sets rules for fence height, location, often different rules for front yards versus side or rear yards.
So,
It lists permitted materials, wood, masonry, wrought iron, etc., and importantly, prohibited materials. Like barbed wire or electric fences are usually banned in residential areas. Chain link might be restricted, maybe not allowed in front yards, or only for specific screening purposes, like around utilities.
balancing privacy and safety with how the neighborhood looks.
Right, and landscaping. That's huge in the UDO, often
Yeah.
very detailed.
Yeah, landscaping makes such a difference.
It does. Developments usually need a landscape plan submitted for review. The UDO specifies things like the minimum size of trees when they're planted. You can't just stick tiny twigs in the ground.
Needs to have some impact sooner.
Right. And specific rules for landscaping within parking lots, requiring landscape islands of a certain size, and sometimes even specifying the minimum volume of soil needed for trees to actually survive in those tough, paved environments.
I saw a note about like 1,000 cubic feet of soil per tree. That sounds like a ton.
It does sound like a lot, but it reflects the reality of what a tree needs to grow to maturity and provide real shade and environmental benefits in a parking lot.
Yeah.
It's based on horticultural science.
Oh, okay.
Perimeter buffers are also key. These are required landscaped strips between different types of development or zoning districts.
Like between a shopping center and houses.
Exactly. The width of the buffer and the amount of planting required often varies based on how different the adjacent uses are. A wider, denser buffer might be needed next to residential. Sometimes you can reduce the width slightly if you build a solid fence or wall within the buffer.
Okay.
And of course, all that required landscaping. It has to be maintained by the property owner. Can't just plant it and forget it.
Is there a requirement for developments to just set aside green space?
Yes, open space requirements. These mandate that a certain percentage of a development site must be preserved or created as open space.
What counts as open space?
The UDO usually defines it. It could be active recreation areas like playgrounds or fields, or passive areas like natural conservation land, trails, maybe plazas. The percentage required often varies by the type of development, and responsibility for maintaining that open space falls on the owner or usually a homeowners association.
Parking lots and loading docks.
Mhm.
Another huge part of how places look and function.
And heavily regulated. The UDO typically provides tables showing the minimum number of parking spaces required for different uses.
Like per store square footage or per apartment unit.
Exactly. It includes standards for accessible parking ADA spaces and, importantly, requires safe walkways connecting parking areas to building entrances and public sidewalks. You shouldn't have to walk through traffic lanes.
Right.
Even details like requiring spaces to be clearly striped or mandating curbs or wheel stops so cars don't overhang onto sidewalks or landscape areas. It's all in there.
It really covers the journey from the street into the lot up to the door. Reforestation. That sounds like it ties back to the environmental goal.
It does. The UDO often encourages preserving existing mature trees during development. Sometimes you get credit towards your landscaping or open space requirements if you save significant trees.
Incentive to keep them.
Right. And it requires developers to install tree protection, temporary fences, signs warning construction crews around trees being saved to prevent root damage or bark scraping during construction.
And screening. Is that like hiding dumpsters?
Yep. Exactly. Screening requirements specify how things like dumpsters, loading docks, outdoor storage areas, maybe mechanical equipment need to be hidden from public view or adjacent residential properties.
How do they require screening? Fences, plants.
Usually a combination. It might require an opaque fence or wall, often supplemented with landscaping like dense shrubs planted closely together that will grow to form a solid screen year-round.
Signs are everywhere. The UDO must have a big section on signs.
Oh yeah, usually a whole article or large section. Sign regulations are always trying to balance a business's need to be seen with the community's desire for visual order and safety.
Tricky balance.
It is. The UDO lists prohibited signs, things like flashing signs, animated signs, signs tacked onto utility poles, roof signs maybe, signs that block traffic visibility, sometimes feather flags or temporary banners used long-term.
Right.
It also requires property owners to remove dilapidated signs, ones that are falling apart, unlit, or advertising a closed business to prevent blight.
Makes sense.
And then there are specific standards for different types of permitted signs: wall signs, monument signs, projecting signs. For example, a suspended sign hanging over a sidewalk has to have a minimum clearance height so people don't hit their heads.
Okay, down to the details again. Finally, I saw something about sustainability incentives. So the UDO isn't just requirements, it's also encouraging good behavior.
Exactly. This is a more proactive part. Many UDOs now include a menu of sustainable practices developers can choose to incorporate.
Like what kind of things?
Things like installing rainwater harvesting systems, like cisterns, incorporating skylights for natural daylighting, making buildings solar-ready with conduit for future panels, maybe achieving a recognized green building certification like LED or Green Globes or NGBS.
Okay, and what's the incentive?
If a developer includes enough of these features from the menu, the UDO might offer benefits. Things like allowing slightly higher density, maybe a few more units, or reducing the minimum required number of parking spaces.
So a tangible reward for going green.
Right. It's a way to use the regulations to nudge development towards better environmental outcomes rather than just mandating minimums. There's usually a process you have to request the incentive when you apply.
Interesting. Bit of carrot along with the stick.
Exactly. Now, stepping back from the rules for individual sites, Article 6 of the UDO often focuses on larger projects specifically, creating new subdivisions and the infrastructure they need.
So taking a big piece of land and dividing it into lots, adding streets, utilities, that whole process.
Right. And a fundamental rule there is plat approval. You can't legally record the subdivision, the official map showing the new lots and streets, or get building permits for those lots until the town has reviewed and approved that plat.
A key control point. What about conservation subdivisions? I saw that term.
Yeah, those are a specific approach to subdivision design. The main goal is to conserve a large chunk of the land, maybe 40 or 50% or more in its natural state, while still allowing some development.
How does that work?
The UDO sets layout criteria. They prioritize protecting sensitive areas first, like floodplains, wetlands, steep slopes, maybe mature forests. Then the homes are clustered more closely together on the remaining, less sensitive parts of the site.
So you get the same number of homes, maybe, but on smaller lots, leaving more green space.
Often, yeah. Or maybe slightly fewer homes overall. It aims to preserve environmental resources and sometimes the rural character of an area.
I also saw fee in lieu. Sounds like paying money instead of doing something.
That's exactly it. In certain cases, especially for public improvements like sidewalks, maybe small park dedications, the UDO might let a developer pay a fee to the town instead of building that specific thing on their site.
Why would they allow that?
Well, maybe the required sidewalk segment doesn't connect to anything yet, or it conflicts with a bigger road project the town has planned nearby. The key is, the UDO usually says those fees have to go into a dedicated fund, earmarked specifically for building those types of improvements elsewhere in town where they make more sense.
Okay, so the money still serves the public purpose, just maybe not right there. What about making sure the developer actually builds the streets and sewers they promise in a new subdivision?
That's where performance guarantees come in. Very important.
Like insurance for the town.
Kind of. Before they start construction on required public facilities, streets, sidewalks, water lines, storm drains, maybe major landscaping, the developer has to provide financial security to the town, usually a bond or a letter of credit from a bank.
Okay.
This guarantee covers the estimated cost of building those things. It ensures the town has the money to finish the job if the developer walks away or goes bankrupt.
Protects the future homeowners, too.
Absolutely. The UDO outlines how parts of this guarantee are released as work is completed and passes inspection, and also how the town can call the bond or forfeit the funds if the developer fails to perform. And once everything is built, the developer usually has to provide as-built plans showing exactly how it was constructed.
It seems like a solid process. What about the streets themselves? Any key rules for new streets?
A really crucial one in many UDOs is that new streets within subdivisions must be built to the town's public street standards. And they typically have to be offered for dedication to the town, so the town takes over long-term maintenance.
So no new private streets usually.
Often prohibited for new subdivisions, yeah. Because private streets put the maintenance burden, paving, snow removal solely on the homeowners in that development, which can become a problem down the road.
I can see that.
The UDO also often encourages street connectivity. It might require developers to build stub streets to the edge of their property if it borders vacant land, allowing for future road connections when that neighboring land develops.
Trying to avoid those isolated subdivisions with only one way in or out.
Exactly. Promoting a more connected street network. Finally, for big projects, the UDO addresses traffic impacts through something called a Transportation Impact Analysis, or TIA.
A traffic study.
Right. For developments expected to generate a lot of new traffic based on size or type, a TIA is required. It has to be prepared by a qualified traffic engineer.
What does it look at?
It analyzes the projected traffic from the new development and how it will affect nearby streets and intersections. It looks at things like level of service, basically, a grade for how congested roads are, like LOSA for free flow down to F for gridlock. The UDO usually sets standards for what LOS is acceptable after the development is built, maybe LOSC or D during peak hours. The TIA also has to look at safety issues, sight distance problems, crash history at nearby intersections, and might recommend improvements the developer has to build, like adding turn lanes or traffic signals.
So the UDO tries to manage the traffic consequences of growth, too. It really is comprehensive. Going back to something we touched on, what happens with those existing properties and nonconformities that don't fit the new rules?
Right. Article 7 usually deals with that. The basic principle is that lawfully established nonconforming uses or buildings or lots, they're generally allowed to continue. The UDO recognizes they were legal when created.
Okay, so you don't automatically have to tear down your old garage if the setback rules change.
Generally not. However, the UDO often explicitly states that these nonconformities are considered generally incompatible with the new rules for that zoning district.
Meaning the town tolerates them, but doesn't exactly love them.
That's a fair way to put it. And because of that, there are usually significant limitations on how they can be changed or expanded.
Like what?
You typically can't enlarge a nonconforming building in a way that increases the nonconformity, like building an addition that makes the setback violation even worse. You also usually can't intensify a nonconforming use if it makes it more out of sync with the neighborhood.
Okay, limits on expansion. What if a nonconforming building gets damaged, say, by a fire or a storm?
That's a really key rule. The UDO almost always has a threshold for damage, often based on the cost to repair versus the building's value, or sometimes a percentage of floor area damage.
Like a 50% rule.
Exactly, something like that. If the damage exceeds that threshold, say it's damaged 51% or more, the UDO often says you cannot rebuild it in its non-conforming state.
Oh, so you'd have to bring it into compliance with the current rules if you rebuild.
Often, yes. That's a major way nonconformities eventually phase out over time. Now, there might be specific exceptions. For instance, sometimes nonconforming single-family homes or maybe manufactured homes have slightly different rules allowing them to be rebuilt even if severely damaged, reflecting a policy choice to let people rebuild their homes. But for many nonconforming commercial buildings or uses, that damage threshold is critical.
Wow, that's a powerful mechanism.
It is. And rules about changing from one nonconforming use to another also exist, often allowing changes to a use of similar or lesser intensity, but maybe prohibiting changes to a more intense nonconforming use.
Okay, that makes sense. So all these rules, who actually makes them happen day to day? Who administers and enforces this whole thing?
Right. The UDO outlines the roles of various town bodies and staff members. It's usually a system with several key players.
Who are they?
Well, at the top, you often have the Board of Commissioners or Town Council, the elected officials. They handle the biggest policy decisions, adopting or amending the UDO itself, deciding on major rezonings, especially complex conditional rezonings tied to specific site plans, and maybe hearing appeals on certain major decisions.
The elected leaders.
Then there's usually a planning board. This is typically an appointed board of citizens, sometimes including elected officials too. They review development proposals like subdivisions, site plans, rezonings, and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners or other decision-making bodies. They provide advice based on the UDO and the town's plans.
Okay, advisory role mostly. What about the Board of Adjustment, BOA?
The BOA is crucial. This is often a quasi-judicial body.
Quasi-judicial, like a court.
Sort of.
Yeah.
They hear appeals when someone believes the planning staff made an error in interpreting or applying the UDO. They also hear requests for variances.
Variances. That's like asking for an exception to a rule.
Exactly. If you have a unique hardship on your property, something about its shape or topography that makes it impossible to meet a specific UDO standard, like a setback, you can ask the BOA for a variance, basically permission to deviate from that rule. But the bar for getting a variance is usually very high. The BOA holds formal hearings, takes evidence, and has to make written findings of fact based only on the evidence presented, justifying their decision.
So if you think a rule is being unfairly applied to your weirdly shaped lot, the BOA is where you might go.
Precisely. Then there's often a technical review committee, or TRC.
TRC.
Yeah, usually made up of staff heads from different town departments, planning, engineering, public works, fire, maybe utilities. They conduct a coordinated technical review of applications like site plans and subdivision plats to make sure they meet all the detailed standards before the application goes to a board or gets final staff approval.
So they check all the engineering and safety boxes.
Right. And finally, you have the planning director or zoning administrator, a key staff person.
The main staff.
Yeah. Often, yes. The director makes many day-to-day administrative decisions themselves, issuing permits like sign permits, temporary use permits, zoning compliance permits, maybe approving minor administrative adjustments to certain standards, interpreting the UDO language when questions arise. Their interpretations are typically considered binding unless appealed to the BOA.
So the planning director is often the first stop. The person who tells you if your project fits the rules or what permits you need. What happens if someone just ignores the rules, builds without a permit, or violates a condition?
That falls under enforcement, usually Article 8. The UDO defines what counts as a violation. It's not just building wrong. It could be using land improperly, violating conditions placed on an approval, failing to maintain required landscaping.
Okay.
The planning director or their designated enforcement officers are usually authorized to investigate suspected violations. If they find one, they issue a formal notice of violation to the responsible person, the owner, developer, occupant, explaining the problem, and usually giving them a certain amount of time to correct it.
Can they just walk onto your property to check things out?
The UDO outlines inspection procedures. They can inspect with the owner's permission, of course, but if permission is denied, they generally need to obtain an administrative search warrant from a court to legally enter private property for an inspection.
Okay, there's a process. What if someone's doing work that's causing immediate harm, like polluting a stream?
For serious situations like that, where work is causing immediate or irreparable harm, the director usually has the authority to issue a stop work order.
Stop everything immediately.
Yes, it has to be in writing, delivered to the person doing the work, and it requires all violating activity to cease immediately until the issue is resolved. There are often specific, sometimes stricter enforcement procedures for violations in really sensitive areas, like the flood hazard overlay, often handled by a specially designated floodplain administrator.
So a structured system. Notice, chance to comply. Then stronger actions like stop work orders or even fines or legal action if needed.
Exactly. It aims to achieve compliance, preferably voluntarily, but has teeth if necessary. And underpinning all of this, literally holding it all together, is the language itself. We mentioned Article 9 earlier, measurement and definitions.
Right, the dictionary part.
It might seem dry, but in a legal document like this, precise language is absolutely critical. Definitions really matter.
Like what kind of definitions?
Things like the difference between a property line being abutting versus adjacent. Abutting means directly touching. Adjacent might just mean nearby, maybe across the street. How you define that affects how you measure setbacks or determine if a buffer is required. How do you measure building height? From what point on the ground to what point on the roof? How is floor area calculated? All these definitions are crucial for applying the rules consistently and fairly.
Yeah, you need everyone using the same ruler, literally and figuratively.
Precisely. So pulling it all together, what this deep dive shows, I think, is just how comprehensive a UDO is. It governs everything from those big picture goals for the community's future down to incredibly specific details like soil volume for trees or the pitch of a roof or the clearance under a sign.
It's massive.
It really is. It's the town's primary attempt to create a predictable, orderly process for growth and change. It's constantly trying to balance competing interests, public safety, environmental protection, neighborhood character, economic development, private property rights. It provides clarity, but yeah, its complexity can also be a challenge for developers and residents alike.
Wow. We really did go deep into that blueprint. It's kind of amazing, actually, how much thought and detailed regulation goes into shaping a town through a document like this. It really makes you appreciate the complexity, maybe even the careful balance it's trying to strike.
It does. And, considering how detailed these rules are, all designed to achieve a predictable, desirable outcome, it leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. How does a document designed for order and predictability, specifying materials down to the inch, setting out precise processes, how does it manage to leave room for innovation? As new building technologies pop up, new ways of living emerge, community needs change. How does a document that seems so rigid adapt? Or does it sometimes, maybe unintentionally, hinder progress or new ideas? What parts of these development rules do you find most interesting or perhaps most frustrating in your own experience?
Hmm. That's a great question. Something to definitely keep in mind next time you look around your own neighborhood or see a new building going up and wonder, how did it get to be that way?